about some late afternoon screwing around with the Webflow? Got a student with some questions. Actually, the questions came in earlier. It's just kind of had a crazy day. We're going to check the live stream, make sure that that is up and running. Yeah, we got good video, good audio. Hot diggity, I like it. I like having stuff that I can work with. That's really all I need in life. I just need a few pieces of content to work with, and then I'm good to go. Hope you're doing well where you are. It's again a little late. Today's kind of shuffled around a little bit. Had some morning client work that needed to be addressed, and now doing a little bit of new pragmatic in the afternoon. We just kind of roll with what we need to roll with. But being that as it is, and this isn't technically a traditional recording, I'm going to go ahead and get this started because I do see CouchBot has fired, so everybody who needs to be aware is aware. So let's leave the station on this. Greetings one and all, Chris Courtney here, New Pragmatics. Time for the feedback loop, afternoon edition. Hope you're doing well where you are. Abby has come through with some questions today that are, when I give feedback to students, I do it in two different ways. Sometimes I do it in written form, and some of my feedback for Abby I've already done in written form, kind of listing out, answering. Basically, she has a question, I give her an answer. And it's probably easier to consume that way because it's very literal. But when things require some futzing around inside of a program, whether it's Figma or maybe it's in CSS or like today it's in Webflow, I think it's better to just hit record and go ahead and get started and work through the problem together. So that's what we're going to do here. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. Okay, so Abby's got a few questions, and this is always pretty these issues are always pretty interesting because there are a couple of different ways that you can handle layering issues. Like Abby's asking here, she's like, I want to do something like the photos below, and this is what she's talking about, where there's some images related to the project that she's working on, and then there's a background color, and then there's this text, and basically how do you make all of that work together? Because it's pretty clear when you're looking at this, like it's difficult to like just draw a box. Like if we were going to draw a box to this side and say that this is in a column and the other stuff is in a column, like there's parts of it that jut out. And Abby's just working in digital design for the first time, so the question is always, okay, so how do I do that? And there's a couple of, from a philosophical perspective, there's a couple of different ways that you could approach it. One, you could just put that image in the background. Like you could make a shape, say, okay, this is a section, I'm going to put this as a background image in that section, and I'm going to anchor it to this side or that. And essentially, I probably would just create this shape over in Figma and export it, or maybe you're going to do it in Photoshop, whatever the tool you choose to use, that's up to you. But I would construct this arrangement here and just make it a single image and throw it over in Photoshop, or or export it from Figma that way. The background color here would probably be something I'm doing directly in the shape or in the section, whatever shape you decide to use. And then the question is, okay, so how do I do this sort of information? And and here I would just probably make a text box, and I would give it some margin from the sides and from the top, or I could do it in Flexbox and just say Flex Center. There's my point is there's a lot of ways that you could float that over. Another option that you could have would just be to utilize Z-index, And again, I would do the same thing with regard to the images, and I would say, okay, um, this is going to be a block, and this is going to be a block, and they're going to set on top of each other, and I'm going to use z-index and say, okay, this block needs to be on top of that block, and they're going to just appear in the right order. So, instead of being at a z-index level of 0, the instant showcase would be at a level of 1, and then this background element could just float behind it. So that's similar to just using a background image on a section, but it is a little different in that I'm not trapping that content inside of the section. I'm actually then dealing with layering. You could also do it with CSS Grid. You could get into grid area, which we've talked about a little bit in the program. If you hop over to newpragmatic.com/frontend, you can get into grid area, and grid area might be where I say, okay, everything here is, maybe it's got a grid area value of background, and then I'm going to take and create a, let's just call this hero text, and I'll say, okay, so hero text is going to be over that in a particular area. But this isn't really that complex, so I'd probably go the background image route, to be completely honest, or maybe the z-index route. I just don't have a lot of moving parts here, and I don't really like this. Just to me feels like this just feels like an image that's here. I do see like there's a circle down here in the corner, and maybe that's literally just positioning. Like I've just said, okay, z-index, and I'm going to position it down there from the bottom and from the left. But there's not a lot of content here. And I'm seeing this image as an image all to itself. So that's philosophically, how I would go about doing something like this. And I wanted to talk about it and talk about those approaches before we actually hop over into Webflow and do it, because I do think that that's something that that you want to kind of talk through what these constructions are going to be before you actually go about building. So you've got this hero unit here, and you've got design process here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add I'm going to add an element here. I'm going to add a section, and that section is going to land right between design process and hero. And I'm going to call this one example. We'll just call this example. So this class is called example. It's got the name. So example, it's interesting because right now this hero unit, the image here is not contained to the hero unit. I don't necessarily know why. It probably has a specific height on it or something. Although I don't see a max height on it at the moment. But that said, we should have the ability. Okay, so if I say overfill, I can't see it. So I've turned, or overflow rather. When overflow is set to hidden, it will contain the elements that are listed above. So this image, even though it goes over, it's part of this hero unit, and I've told the hero unit I don't want to see any more of that. So let's talk about our example section here in terms of like I'm going to put a background image into it. One thing to realize with that is if you go in and you say I'm going to have a background image inside of this section, what displays is going to be dependent on the actual height of the section. So if I came in and I said, okay, I'm going to select this, and okay, so we've got background down here. And if I said, you know what, I want to add an image, and I haven't done this in Webflow in a while, but I'm going to say, okay, yeah, I want to choose an image, and over here, so this is your assets panel. I'm going to go ahead and add an image. It says from the cloud, so I'm guessing it's going to allow me to search maybe online. Oh, okay. So it's just saying, okay, find something on your desktop that you want to utilize, and I'm not sure. No, that's not what I'm looking for. I'll go to downloads really fast. There are some images that I have. Yeah, let's just use this one for right now. So what this is probably going to do, when it says, oh, max size for these files is 4 megabytes. Well, that was interesting. So I guess I'll have to find a smaller image. You know, but for, well, this is really dragging a little bit. Man, Webflow, Jesus. Pull it together, really. Let's pay attention here. So that image was 5.8. So if I go to another image, this says this image is 1.7. I don't really like that image though. That image is pretty good. So let's use that for a second. There was a problem signing the asset. What problem is Webflow having? I'm not a big fan of Webflow, and this is underscoring why I have issues with it. Not a great photo. Let's just go with this one. Let's just see if Webflow will allow me to use anything. There was a problem signing the asset. Okay, Webflow, you're drunk. I'm going to go ahead and use this image then. Okay, it's there. We can see it. Right now, it really looks like it is really large. So I'm going to say cover. That should shrink it down. But notice that the size here is specific to basically what we get out of the box for the section. Okay, so this example. If I wanted to that's great. If I wanted to make this taller, I could do that a couple of different ways. And I'm just going to kind of show you some things that we could do. One, you could come in and you could say, oh, you know what, I want a minimum height of 300 pixels. And that's going to make it 300 pixels. You're going to always have to adjust it from there, and that's not typically how I would want to do this. But by giving it a height, you have the ability to display more of the image. Okay, so that's good to know. Let's delete that away, though. What I really want to do here, I'll just say 0, so it where did it go? It seems to be angry now that I guess because I gave it a percentage, now it wants something. So I'm gonna say 100. So that'll give us something back. Before, I don't think we actually had anything assigned to it, but I'm guessing that Webflow is like, hey, you assigned a value, now you don't have a value, but you gave me a value, so now you always and forever and ever will require a value. Stupid, but anyway, it seems like if I remove the value, it should just go right back to where it was. But that said, what we want to do now is we want to add some content in here. And, you know, you have in this other, so you have like, in the other one you have a grid. We don't need a grid here. The grid's not necessary for this. So I'm just going to add a I'm going to add a container to this, and the well, you know what? I'm going to add a div just for simplicity's sake, so that we don't get caught up in some other container issue that might be going on. But this div, it's funny, once you have the div in there, the div takes on properties of its own. But for our purposes, I want this to have a width of, let's just say 30%. And let's go ahead and give it a height of 300 pixels for now. Okay? And you might be saying, well, wait, why is that now pushing this around? And I'm going to call this hero content. Okay, so that's called hero content. I also want to have this off the side by 10%. And you're probably saying, Chris, I can't see what's happening there. So because of that reason, I'm just going to give this a color so that we can see where that is. Now this is very interesting to me because I know why it's interesting to me. You probably have 90% set to the width of this, which means this is 5%, not 10%. So I'll just change this to 10% or 5%. So there it is, moves it right there. Okay. You're probably saying to yourself, okay, Chris, I see that you've added that content or that block. Why is it controlling the height? Well, this is now I'm going to remove the height. The minimum height has now been removed from the example. So before we kind of had to have that. And if I change this to 400, you'll see that it actually extends beyond. What I prefer to do, I prefer to force the content to follow, force the shapes to follow the content. So if I add more content in here, that shape will get larger or smaller based on the amount of content that is in this block. Furthermore, because I don't want my content to ever bump into the edges of this block, this is where I like to use margin on the elements that are inside of a shape. So I've got my example, right? We see that. And I've got my example and I've got my hero content here. That hero content, I'm going to go ahead and just add a margin of, let's just say, do I have rems available to me? I have M's, but I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm just going to say I want 100 pixels to the top and the bottom. And you know what? That's not working the way that I wanted it to. So I'm going to come through and select this, and I'm going to say instead padding, because and I'll just say 50 pixels. And what this should do is it should so we've got margin to the side, we've got padding to the top and bottom. When I remove this color, or if I come in here and adjust this color to where we can see through it, you should be able to see, like, okay, I get where that resides. What's most important to me, though, is the content that's going to be inside of it. And somebody keeps calling, so I'm going to have to answer this really fast. All right. So with that said, let's go ahead and put some content in here. I'm going to go ahead and add, let's just add a heading. We'll bring that right on in here. And we'll say, yeah, that's H1, that's fine. So now that heading's in there, and you might be saying, okay, well, Chris, why is it not going all the way to the top? Well, because, again, on this hero content, I have placed padding on it, right? if I come through and I say, okay, no padding to either the top or bottom, that impacts the size that we have here. I could also say no height on that shape, and now, well, actually we should say minimum height. Now the height is really constrained to whatever the content is. Now if I come into the content and I say, hey, you know what, on this heading I really want I want a margin to the top of 100. You know, that's pushing it down from the section that's ahead of it. So if I, instead of doing that, I'm going to make that push off with padding because it's inside of the shape. Now what's interesting here is Webflow is not wanting me to do that. So I'll change that back to 0 as well. And we'll just do that with the div. And the reason why I believe this is happening is the heading is an inline element where the div is, the hero content block here is a block level element. So let's go with that instead, and we'll go back and we'll place that padding right there at the top, and we'll do it again at the bottom. And we'll remove this minimum height so that you know, if you remove that minimum height, now this breathes based on, you know, let's actually type in here for a second. And it just keeps expanding. This is what you want your content doing. You want your content driving the design, because when you get down to mobile sizes, it will still respond to the content. So if your content goes from being 1 line to 3 lines, the shape that you're working with will respond accordingly. All right. So this is. Oh, actually, we should highlight all that. Weird. These are the parts of the videos that I generally speed up through. Okay. See, a project name goes here. This is how, but you know, your initial prompt was, how do I get the text over the content? This is probably the number one way that I would go about doing it. Additionally, like if you want more content here, just, you know, come through, you might want a paragraph or something to go along with this heading. There we go. And you see it automatically gets longer. Now, your trick is that you've got this background image, and you have other background images that you might want to use, like this one. Right? I mean, that's basically what you're trying to do. You're trying to get this content to allow for odd shapes to come through. That's totally the way to go about it. Now, if you want it to make this wrap, there are other things that you can do. Like one, if you want this column to be wider and this column to be narrower, one concept that you might look at is, okay, so let's look at hero unit, and let's say, all right, so maybe you're not 30, maybe you are 35. Okay. Well, that works okay for the header, but what about this? What about this paragraph? Well, maybe that paragraph needs a width of 75%. And now the width of that paragraph is the paragraph is getting out of the way. All right. Where this becomes more brittle is if you are in, when this goes from desktop to mobile and this starts moving around. And that's where I really think that the approach of using Z-index becomes a little more flexible, because you can then say, hey, at a certain size, change the orientation here. Where right now, this is all built into one shape, and what you basically have is you always have this in the background. And because this is always in the background, when this gets smaller, this information is just going to it's going to attempt to slide back here. The thing that I would look at there is, okay, yeah, this box gets long in that instance, but you can see what's happening to your content. Your background image is like barely peeking out down here, so that's not really a great plan either. But this is where I would say, oh, hey, instead of being 35, now it's 90, right? And instead of being 75, now this is 100. And now you've got this issue with the background element. And it's like, okay, all right, so what do I do with that? That might be an instance where, for mobile, I might say, hey, you know what? I want the shape to be taller instead of wide. So maybe here I come through and I say, okay, so here maybe this is 20 to the top and 200 to the bottom. Let's see here, 200. And it looks like I changed my sizes by accident. Sorry about that. Now let's get back in here and how am I doing that? I'm really making it angry, and I'm not exactly sure why Webflow is so upset. It's a baby. I just don't like Webflow. That's the problem, kids. Call it like you see it. All right, so there is that. We still are not getting this over, and that's where you've got to come through and you got to say, okay, so I've got this section, right? And in this section, which I really would like to be able to see the section. There it is. So in this section, called example, I need to do something different with the background image. Because the background image as it stands, oh, what happened there? Oh, did it reload? Oh, that was garbage. So you're going to get rid of all my changes? Webflow, that was weak. It's going to reload the whole thing. All the updates that we made are going to be gone. Ugh. Garbage. Try it out for next project. I don't think I will. Thanks, though. Okay, so therein lies a problem, because we were on the home page, not on this page, and it got rid of all of our... No, I'm not loving things. Thank you. It got rid of all the work that we had done there. But by and large, I think you got the idea, in that we're going to go wide. We're going to use a background image. We're going to put content over the top of that, but we're going to use margin and padding to give that some space. And then, but as you get into mobile, you're going to have to make other adjustments. So just know that moving forward is going to be a necessary tweak. And we kind of talked about, how do we overlap? How do we go through it and do the simplified page as you discussed below? And then you had one here. It says, I also want to, how can I make design process listed double liners spaced out properly and look decent? Now, that I see design process, and I don't necessarily see. I mean, are you talking about this? This looks like it might be the fabled double liner that you're referring to. but I see text span, and I see process list, and I see design process. So that's the top level here. I honestly don't necessarily know. Is this manually kicked over? Yeah, it is. So I would just like, it's going to go the width of whatever you have. So you have plenty of space over here. That doesn't have to be 2 lines. So I would just make it 1 line. Now this all lines up. I'm just want to take a look and see if there's other areas where and Webflow is doing the same thing for me that it was doing for you. It's just kind of bouncing on everything. It's really not a great experience. It works fine when you launch it, but like when you're actually creating it, it's not the best thing in the world. All right, so that's where I'm going to leave it at for today. So that's where we're going to leave it at for today. Webflow kind of crapped out there at the end, but again, this is what happens when you're working in preview mode. If you were working in the file itself, it wouldn't do those weird things that it was doing for us. But if you could remember to use a background element, or to create an element using like a section, put a background image in that section, and then create a section for your typography off to the side, that would be the easiest way that you can move forward. Z-index is also something that you can look into. I'm not really familiar with where Webflow might be hiding Z-index. It would appear to me that it has to be in there somewhere. It might actually be in element settings. No, that's like H1s, H2s, style manager, interactions. I don't think it's there. So that might be something that we can look further into with regard to Z-index, but I right away it doesn't appear. It doesn't. I can't tell where they might be hiding that at. If you wanted to go that route, all right. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for today's edition of the Feedback Loop. Thank you, Abby, for submitting your work for feedback. I've got other notes over in your journal as well. And if you got value out of this, if you're watching and following along, feel free to hit that like button, subscribe if you'd like to be notified when we go live. And if you're looking for mentorship, I know where you can find some. All right, take care, everybody.